Hey, everybody. All right. Welcome again to another episode of the Coach's Corner. Friday night. We're happy to have everybody here. Please make sure to go ahead and like the stream if you'd like. We're happy to have everybody. We have a great episode tonight. Kind of had to make a quick shift because we had one of the episodes we had planned didn't quite get scheduled right. So we are very fortunate to have a good friend of mine, Duke Savaric from the Kingdom of Ontario, who has agreed to come on and do a class that he's been teaching at Sport of Kings for a number of years. And this is a class that I have wanted to take for probably close to 10 years. But every time we get there, it turns out that he and I are always teaching classes opposite each other. So it's been kind of tough. So this is going to be 100 things to make you 5% better. That's a lot of the little things that people don't think about that make a huge difference, especially when you are able to kind of compound these things. As always, we've got His Excellency Tristan, who's joining us as well. So we're happy to be here. Savaric, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Duke Savaric from Ontario. I've been a knight for 16 years. I found that out 2 weekends ago. I've been probably fighting for, too long to count. I've really enjoyed my time and my journey in the SCA. It took me a while to get serious. But once I sort of got that taste for it, I've never stopped loving it. I've been enjoying everything I've put into it. A couple of years back, I was given the opportunity to teach at Sport of Kings and came up with this class. And it's been a lot of fun. So,
Around.
You want to talk about
Yeah, let's get into it and let's talk about the general philosophy of this and kind of the genesis of this and kind of how it came to be.
Yeah. So at the point where this came off, I was probably a relatively new knight. I think I'd been taking a lot of people trying to make sense of the chaos fighting, the type of fighting that we do. And I actually I woke up in the middle of the night and I just went, oh no, we have to explode it. I just had this epiphany. I'm like, I want it all. And I got out of bed and I wrote out about 70 things just by hand of all these neat ideas of what I thought was affecting my fighting and my learning. And I was excited about it. And I think I was at a 12th night or something. And I happened to be talking to Duke Paul, who's been one of my mentors over the years. And he said, that's actually a really neat idea. So he said, send it to me. So times at this point, we're probably sitting around 80 things, right? And then he sent me this really neat email. You've got something really neat here, but I'm gonna step out because if I keep playing with this, it's going to be the Duke Paul and Savaric class because I want this to be yours. And I thought that was a very, very cool thing to do. And then shortly thereafter, I was given the opportunity to teach it at Sport of Kings. At that time, it was just this big list of things, and there was no organization to it. And that didn't go over very well. People couldn't handle it. They needed to see some kind of format, right? So I got sort of I got pushed into breaking it into a couple groups so that people could accept that. But I wanted to take a second and talk about the complexity of our sport. Okay. And it's really interesting if you compare our sport to a sport that you do as an individual. Like the first thing to consider is an opponent, right? And not only do we have an opponent, but we have a dynamic opponent. We have multiple opponents, and they are shifting and they are changing, right? So you're not just trying to beat a time on a clock. You're trying to beat a person. right? And that person or that group are shifting what they're doing from year to year. So it's a dynamic bar, and you have to keep always addressing that. What's going on with my opponents? Because whether you're trying to get knighted or you're trying to bird that you're pushing up against, right? So rapier fighting or heavy fighting, I could probably put 25 to 30 pieces, and in that gear, you also have decisions that you would have to make on that gear, like a helmet, for example. It's not just one piece of gear. There's does it have? Is it closed face? Is it barred? Do you have a big Smurf point on the top of it like mine? So those factors that affect our gear, and you probably have about 50 decisions to make when you look at a suit of armor. It's really quite complicated, and there's also no real restrictions. So if you look at like hockey or baseball or like any Olympic sport, all the equipment has restrictions, right? Like you can't just invent your own hockey stick, right? You can't just decide that you're going to wear a different helmet if you're playing football. It's all pre-designed. This is a helmet. Put it on. There you go. You might decide to change brands, but this is a football helmet. This is a baseball bat, right? There's different weights, but you can't make it one-handed, right? You can't make it whatever you want, right? Whereas with our style of fighting, there's safety rules, but that's kind of it. We can pretty much do whatever we want, right? So we're trying to navigate all these decisions with all this equipment, and all these things are happening. And you're also trying to look cool at the same time, right? You're trying to look like a particular type of medieval fighter. So there's this pressure to wear a certain kind of helmet, use a certain kind of shield because that matches your persona. And then again, you compare other sports and they'll do whatever they want, right? So we're trying to look cool, navigate all these gear decisions, and compete with opponents that are also ever changing, right? And it's just a really it's a really complicated thing. This isn't just like playing football or playing soccer or skiing or golf. Like there's a lot of weird things going on or with a lot of decisions to make. So I think
we see a lot of people that come. We see a lot of people that come into the sport early on, and there's that excitement of I get to hit people with sticks and not go to jail, and then that's exciting and everything. But at some point where you decide that you want to do this well, like your input, your investment changes. And I think that's somewhere you're talking about is like that's where things start getting complicated, is when you decide that you want to do this well. Did you freeze up there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and wanting to be better, and it's probably because my friends started winning stuff, and I'm like, hey, well, if you can do it, I can do it. That looks like fun, and then it built on that, right? And I mean it's interesting. You mentioned that at the very beginning. Like one of my notes here is there's no clear path, right? Like. Tristan, you do regular martial arts, right?
Yes.
There's usually a right and wrong way to do something, right? In heavy fighting or in even SCA rapier fighting, you can disagree with someone, but ultimately the fighter gets to decide where they put their foot. The fighter gets to decide, whether they're going to try this thing or that thing. Whereas in a more formal or established martial art, it's like, right? And you need to be leaning forward or else you're doing it incorrectly. This is the this is the way to do this throw, or this is the way to punch a person in this way. It's a little more rigid, but in some ways that's
instructors that embrace kind of either one of those theories. Personally, I think that's why it's called a martial art, is that there is not one way. If it was a martial science, there would be only one way to do it. Meanwhile, you'll have instructors that will say this, that you need to put your foot 15 degrees, not 14, not 16, not, it's got to be 15 degrees or it's wrong. However, with the variations of anatomy, even how just individuals move, all the variables that go into it, they might have to adjust it. And that's, to me, I'm more of the artist type of perspective than the science type. There are certainly fundamentals that you can't just go and make your own rules for anything martial. There are constraints you have to work within, but I personally think there are many ways to skin a cat. There is no one perfect method or form. There's crappy form for sure, but I don't think there's a one perfect. Although some instructors will make you think that, and if you're not doing it exactly down to the number that they tell you, they'll be all over you. But
that's the thing we talk about a lot on here is that there's no one right way to do this, but there's a lot of bad ways to do this.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, hey, it looks like he dropped out.
Yeah, I think we're having some connection problems with him. There was some cutting out there.
Let's give you just a second here. We'll see if we can get him back on there.
Mm-hmm. And just on a little tangent, while we're waiting for him to reconnect, it's one of those things that I've seen more in the martial art world than in the SCA. But there will be that person that kind of wants to feed their ego by saying, "I'm right, and you have to do it this way. And if you're not doing it the way I tell you, it's wrong, and you're wrong." And you can, after you see it a few times, you can spot the ego ride.
Savaric, you were dropping out there a little bit.
Yeah, I think there was maybe too much bandwidth going on in the other room.
Yeah. So the kids watching the Netflix, right?
Yeah, and probably the adults playing on their phones too. So
I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, so I mean, I got a bit of what Tristan was saying, and I understand, like, it's not black and white, but it's generally more structured than what we're doing, right?
Definitely more structured. There's more of a guidance factor than here, just put your stuff on and go figure it out.
Right. And I think especially in the sense that when you go to a dojo to learn one of the Eastern disciplines, there is the teacher, and everybody's learning from the teacher. Whereas you go to an SCA fighter practice, and pretty much every night is a teacher. Like every night has kind of their own dojo. And so you're learning from several different people. And again, it's not so much that any of those is wrong necessarily, but you're definitely missing that structure of this is the person that is giving the training. And even, Tristan, in your dojo, you have people that you've worked with that are trainers, but they're still teaching your system.
Right. And this is one thing. In fact, I just saw a really great video, and this is by a guy named Keenan Cornelius, and he is a rather famous jiu-jitsu competitor, and he's got his own dojo, and he talked about the danger of the cult of personality, where you have the one guy who's the authority, like he is the ultimate, everything he says is right and everything else has got to go by him. And he talked about how toxic that can be, and he has seen dojos and organizations that have collapsed because that model is just
it's untenable.
It is untenable, and he actually takes the position, one, that he doesn't teach very much in his dojo. He has his instructors that do the teaching. And if he sees one of them start to become too much of a Mr. Big Britches, he said, I'll start taking him out of the teaching rotation, and I'll have other instructors come in so that you don't get that dominance by one or a couple of personalities. And in that sense, I kind of like the SCA for the fact that the knights generally, and there are exceptions in areas, but the knights are generally looked at as just another instructor, and you go to different ones to find advice that might work for you. Right. Overall, that seems to be the majority of how people treat it, as opposed to there's this one godlike guy and everybody else is an idiot. So yeah. Anyway, let's carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a real strong community. So anyways, came up with this idea of having, the fact that there's all these factors that can affect the game. And I applied some project management to it. That's what I do mundanely, and came up with, some of the philosophies on the easiest way to get better. And I'll briefly want to talk about like the difference of 5%. If you look at, say, Crown Final, and you look at two people that are having one of the best days of their career, and they have, they're fighting away, and what makes or breaks the day, 5% can change that, right? The amount of the difference between blocking that shot and not blocking that shot, like there's very few Crown Finals where you see someone just walk in and just destroy the other person, right? And that can be translated down to from Crown Finals to Principality to baronial level. Like anytime you're fighting in a tournament, and that's your arena, that's the tournament that you're going for. Whether it's an unbelted tournament, it doesn't really matter. The top people at that time at that level are often separated by less than a 5% difference, right? I mean, it's still a great philosophy, continual improvement, but I'm really looking at this thing like the difference between, me fighting you now and me fighting you, 6 months ago. Like I'm like, it's such a subtle difference with little changes can make, and to me, it's worth pursuing that little bit of effort to make yourself. To me, 5% at the end of the day, 5% is huge, right? Yeah. Everything I'm talking about in this stuff, it's not really about building that foundation. It's pretty much assuming you already know how to fight at whatever level you are. This is just a concept of trying to get a little bit more out of the tank, and how to get whether you're a squire or a knight, it doesn't really matter where you are. There's still an opportunity to get a little bit better, and I still use this, right? Like last time I fought in Crown in a tournament last weekend, and I'm like, I need to build a new chin strap, right? That's on my list. That's what I need to do. I hate this. I replaced my chin strap and I freaking hate it, right? So back to the shop, build it like my old one. I thought it'd be neat. It's not, and it was affecting my fighting. It got to the point where I didn't want to take my helmet off because it was such a pain to get it all set up right. So now I'm sitting there in between rounds with my helmet on, and I should be taking it off to let it go off, right? So that little chin strap cost me, right? And that's another way to look at this. If you're like, well, what makes a 5% or point or not? Anytime you've ever given yourself an excuse as to why you didn't do well, that's it. That's what we're talking about, right? So, if you ever hear yourself saying, or someone else saying, well, I wasn't really training, that's why I didn't do well, or I've been really working a lot lately, so I haven't been focused on this. That's why you didn't do well. That's something that's going to affect your game, and you can affect that, right? So, so I guess I'll jump in and start diving into the actual meat of it.
We do have a quick question from a listener. If we could maybe do that right before you dig in with your content. Here we go. Let's pop that up here. How do you feel about training with a series of repetitive attacks, an attacker and a defender, taking turns being each? Say 2 fake, high stepper, 3 blow option. I'm not really sure what that second one means. Maybe you could make something of that. But I think they're talking about a type of drilling.
I think any drill can be beneficial. Absolutely. And I think a drill, I didn't invent this at all, but a drill should be, someone should be receiving it. Someone should be doing it, and someone should be receiving it. Right. So if you set up a drill where you're like, hey, throw 3 shots at me, make one of them a leg shot, because I need to practice blocking my leg. anytime you want to take any skill that we do and isolate it into a safe environment, or words that I've completely stolen, then you can actually be watching for it, right? I don't believe in competitive drills at all. I think that's just a weird way of fighting. So if you want to practice spinning multiple shots together, like this person said, absolutely, right? And if you can find a training partner, say, hey, let me throw at least 3 shots at you in succession. I want to get better at that. Then that's a great way to do that. So yeah, absolutely.
I think going back to what we were talking about in terms of structure, this is one thing that I think the SCA overall could use great improvement on, is the integration of using drills in a progression from form practice to sparring. Usually there's this big gap between, working on your form, which is things like pel work or, specific shot form and things, mechanics, to now you're dealing with a full-on live opponent. And that's a harsh gap to cover. And that's where those drills really exist and do a great job of transitioning people up into that full sparring type venue.
Absolutely.
Anyway, okay, so let's go ahead with the program.
Jumping in. Okay, so the list of 100 things, and there's a few extra. It's broken into everything you can do while you're at home, and then things you can do when you're practicing. I consider any training practicing, that's all together, pel work at home or at fight practice. And then the last set is the things that you can do while you're actually at an event or on the way to the event. So I'll jump in. And I'm not gonna be able to get through all of them, so I'm gonna pick some of my favorites and use them as examples. This is at home. This is to do with your armor, right? So every once in a while, you should dump out your armor bag. In fact, I think before every big tournament, you should dump out your armor bag and systematically repack it and have a look at everything. But it's a very simple thing, but the value of footwear is underestimated in the SCA, I believe. When you look at any mundane sports, real world sports, go walk into a sports store and see how many different kinds of shoes there are, right? And all these like very specialized. Of course, there's money in this, but I remember fighting in oversized Dayton boots that had foam jammed in them so that they would fit me, and they were terrible, right? Or people are fighting in sort of sloppy period shoes. It's like, I fight in leather shoes, slightly period shoes, but they have to be good fitting. They have to have the right traction. And like I said, looking at other sports, footwear is incredibly important. Little things like little adjustments you can make, the type of fabrics that you're wearing. You should be wearing, in my opinion, either natural fibers or sportswear that's designed to wick. So your Under Armour and linen, those are sort of my two favorites. And if you're wearing something that's heavy and it's restricting the heat, you're gonna cook, because we do a lot of us practice in the evenings where it's nice and cool, and then we go down to an event and we start fighting at say 1 o'clock, and we cook, right? And you're basically wearing a ski suit with hockey gear on top of it and a big helmet. You're gonna cook, right? So heat can be an absolute enemy, right? Getting into to the extremes of how I've tried to get heat out of my body. I have my Hellminer has vents in it. I've got, an old trick is, the armpit is cut out of my gambeson. And it's kind of a funny one, but your crotch is another area where you have a lot of heat, right? And in a normal fighting kit, you've got you're wearing underwear, you're wearing maybe compression shorts with a cup or jock strap holding your cup. And then you've got this heavy fighting pants that have to be big enough that you can, spread your legs wide in them. And they've got to be strong enough that they don't rip out the first time you fight from your knees, right? And so there's a lot of stuff there. And And I was thinking about, well, how do I, it's going to sound weird, but I need crotchless pants, right? And I was laughing at myself for thinking of this. Then it dawned on me that that's exactly what I wear with my garb, right? So I started fighting with hose instead of pants. And now it's way better, right? So I'm always looking for ways to adjust my clothing so that it's allowing heat to escape. The other things about your armor is like, being able to move properly, being under or over armored. There's always a fine line at different levels of our fighting. If you're under armored too early, you might get hurt. If you're over armored, you can't gauge. So there's a fine line, and understanding sort of where you're at in the path as to how much armor you're going to be wearing is something that we should be considering. I'm going to jump down to swords and shields. A good trick is rotate your swords. I've seen people that are fighting with soft swords. I've seen swords break in a tournament. And to me, that's just absolutely unacceptable, right? So every Crown tournament, brand new sword. Rare 10 is not that expensive, right? And I don't practice with my new swords. So I have several basket hilts. I have my tournament sword, I have my practice sword, and I have my Pell work sword. And when I pretty much bust one up on the Pell or give it to some new guy, I will then rotate the whole series down. But the sword I fight in tournament with, I only fight tournament with. And I make them 3 at a time, so they're always the same, right? Your sword grip, play around with different styles of grip. I use bat tape. If you're going to use grip tape, I've grabbed some people's swords and I'm like, oh, it's garbage, right? And some people don't have any grip tape. Some people wear gloves. Whatever you decide to do, I would experiment. The connection between you and the sword is very important, and I would suggest that people experiment with styles. If you're going to use grip tape, buy the best grip tape you can buy. Don't cheap out there. It's like spend the extra $10 and get the really good grip tape. I actually took a basket hilt off one of my swords so I can show this. I use the good bat style grip tape, and I've got a trigger, and I actually weave the trigger through the bat tape so that when I put my hand in there, my hand is actually on nothing but grip. I don't even want the trigger in between me and the sword. And that's just a little tweak that I've done that I quite like. Again, decisions. Like your sword will have multiple decisions. It's got the basket hilt. It's got, what type of grip, whether you're using a thrusting tip. My shield, I use a heater shield. Same thing. I've got grip tape. I just want to show people this. I put a big chunk of foam right here, and that's where my wrist bone digs into. And so there's I have 3 layers of foam there because it's curved. But by adding that extra buildup of foam, first of all, it's incredibly comfortable, right? And I can lean into that. I can dig my wrist into that, and it locks my shield up so that it doesn't move at all. If I borrow a shield that doesn't have something like that, I can't fight with it. I just it's very weird. So I do that. I make sure all my squires do that so I can steal their shield. But that's just it's just these little tiny things. And I remember showing a fighter that was fighting heater, and I was trying to explain that. So I grabbed my shield and here, try this. And I gave it to them, and they just looked at me like I, showed them fire for the first time. It was like, it just blew them away. Right. It's like, this is so comfortable. I'm like, yeah, it is. Right. So playing around with little things and setting your gear up so that it's comfortable is incredibly important. Jump down to physical conditioning. And by the way, I change this list all the time. I take things out. There's no right or wrong to any of this stuff as far as I'm concerned. If someone goes, well, that doesn't make sense, I don't agree with that, I'm like, great, there's 99 other things you could be working on, right? So whatever, right? Physical training. So this is things you're doing, like not This isn't like training, SCA training. This is stuff at home, like working out in your home gym and stuff like that. Cardio is really important. Hydration. I think I've got this a couple times. Hydration is probably, if anyone wants to take anything out of any of this list, take the hydration, and that's enough, right? I don't know how many people I watch sitting at the sidelines trying to make up for poor hydration while they're in armor. If you're dehydrated at the field, it's too late, right? So I always try to pre-hydrate before the trip down to the event. And I mean like drinking enough water so that I'm peeing through it like crazy. And then I usually stop a little bit before the 7-hour drive, right?
Yeah, that's something people understand about hydration, is that hydration starts like a week before you're expected to perform.
Yeah.
Like a week. Because we're all chronically
hydrated.
And
My minimum is usually the Wednesday, so I'll start drinking a little more the week ahead, and then Wednesday I'll try to plan an afternoon where I'm at the office and there's a washroom nearby, and I will drink like a couple of these to the point where I know that I'm fully hydrated, and then I try to maintain that and get to the event. And when I'm fighting, I just sip water, right? So you're not fighting that unstoppable thirst. I remember, you're also hot, so your brain's saying, try to cool off. So you have to try to fight that, right? So pre-hydrating is really important. And then, your diet, obviously. This is sort of gearing towards an event a little bit. I'm going to jump down a little farther. If you're on the list, there's things you can do when you're at home. You can watch videos. I think I'm back. Watching videos, going to workshops. There's a couple of years ago, I was sort of plateaued and I was living at Sean's house, and it was very beneficial for me, right? So going to workshops, going to getting yourself in a place that you can learn, listening to Coach's Corner. I read books. I'll read books on martial art training and stuff like that. Things that I don't actually do, but the one thing about our there's not really a lot of people writing books about heavy fighting. I know Paul did one. So I'll read other books and see what applies to heavy fighting. One thing that was really neat that a friend of mine did, Duke Savaric, he lent me some of his books that he had highlighted, right? And he told me, color, highlight what you think is cool, and then give me back the book. And I'm going to go over the book again, and I'm going to see what you like. And I thought it was a neat idea. And when I read it, it was super cool, because here I am reading this book that one of my heroes lent me, and I'm like, oh, he liked this part. I'm going to absolutely pay attention to this part. Right. So I've done that a couple times, and I think it'd be a really neat thing to do more of. Now here's probably the best one of the page, especially for someone that's sort of planning or trying to get knighted. Plan your year ahead, right? So sit down, get a year calendar, and figure out what events you're going to go to, where you're going to fight, which ones are important. You should never get surprised that Crown Tournament's 3 weeks away, right? You should, whether it's a baronial tournament or at one of these performance events, right? If it matters to you, it should be on your calendar. If you live with someone, you should talk.
Yeah, you were frozen up again.
I was frozen up?
Yeah, you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the calendar, right? Having your year planned out ahead of time makes so much sense. And you should never be surprised by an event showing up. I'm not sure if that's frozen or not, but also it's really important to be prepared for what the format's going to be. So you can mentally prepare for either a round robin style, or is it 2 out of 3, or what are we going into here, right? Okay, so the next thing is practice. Quick second here. So you can do different things when you're at practice. Having someone watch you, deciding different things can do.
I guess you're frozen up there again.
Sometimes I'll go to practice and I'll just the storm, just focus on my.
Sorry about the difficulties there, folks. Looks like we got some bandwidth issues going on there.
Yeah, we had, just while we're kind of waiting for this, a question come in from one of the viewers about hydration. The question was, so start drinking 2 liters of water a day, plus any loss from practice or workout a week before. Hydration is, there are a lot of variables that contribute to whether or not you're hydrated or not hydrated. Now there he's back. Just very quickly, the environment can vastly vary how hydrated you are, or how quickly you get dehydrated. Not just your own effort. Also, people's bodies are different. Some people will hold water a little better, and other people get dehydrated very, very quickly, as well as your nutrition. There are vitamins and minerals that if you're deficient on, the water will just run through your body. So you can drink a lot, but you're still getting dehydrated. So hopefully that answers a little bit
Tristan,
of the question.
That's something that when you and I taught at the Known World Routine Symposium, that is one of the biggest takeaways that I took from your class. Was, you can have gallons of water in you, but if your mineral balance isn't right, that water can't actually get into your bloodstream.
Correct.
And so you've got a stomach full of water that is just sloshing around, and it's not actually getting into your bloodstream.
Yep, absolutely. And so one of I think the points that Savaric was talking about is use the time to learn about how your body works, because you are an athlete. And if you don't know how your body's functioning, working, you don't know how to listen to it, you don't know what it's telling you, you don't know how to maintenance it like a mechanic works on a race car. You can wind up, you talk about 5%, this can be 10, 20%. When you can't perform because your body is just not working very well. And I don't want to get too much into the hydration. This is a rabbit hole we can go down, but I will post something in the comments about the minerals and whatnot. So Savaric, welcome back.
Yeah, sorry. If I drop out again, I'll have to move to another room. I think I might be too far away from my router. That might be what's going on. I've had this many problems, but I'm worried that it's on my end. Anyway, so we'll jump in to training, coaching, right? So we all need a coach, right? If you're serious and you're trying to move, you need a coach. Now, your coach may or may not be, if you're a squire, your coach actually might not be your knight. Your knight might be a mentor. But a coach is something to me a little bit different. So you'll have and sometimes you'll need both, right? So if you live your night and that's the relationship you have, that's fine. But if you don't, you kind of need someone, in my opinion, need someone that you're sort of training around, that's close to you. And it might be a little bit more of a training buddy, but someone that's going to be there at your practice and helping you get through. And then I think you need a mentor too, right? So if you're a squire and it's your night, that's pretty clear. But even in that relationship, sometimes that can change. As relationships change, maybe the night's not active anymore. Sometimes you'll need another mentor, right? And then once maybe you've already become a knight and you're still trying to progress, having a mentor is still really important if you're still looking to grow, right? So I think that's super important. And that person can also change. Like very often with the SCA culture, if you take on a fealty relationship, that's it, right? But having a relationship where someone's your coach or a training buddy or a mentor, that person can change out throughout your fighting career. And I find myself from different times not having a coach. And if I want to take a run at things, then I make sure I have someone that's helping me, right? Sometimes I outrank them. Sometimes I've been fighting longer than them, but they're the one that's at practice. And I need that feedback. I need that encouragement, right? There's another one, probably directed to squires more, but knights too. Ask for feedback before you do a set with someone. So if we're hanging around crown, especially beforehand, but even sometimes after, or even if it's at a practice, I might just be practicing training because I've got a crown in my sights or I've got a tournament that I'm training for, and someone will come up to me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to fight?" I'm like, "Absolutely, let's do this." And we do a couple sets. I'm actually working on myself. I'm fighting and I'm training. If you want feedback, a really good way to do it is ask before we fight. Then the person will be thinking about that while they're fighting you. Because I've had a lot of time where, I'll be training with someone and they'll be like, "Well, what do you got for me?" I'm like, "Nothing. I was just trying to kill you. I'm sorry." Right. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes people won't admit that. So they'll do a set with someone and they'll say, "Do you have any advice for me?" And that person will just give them some random advice. And then the person walks away going, "Wow, I need to work on this and this and this." And it's like, well, that was kind of the first thing that came to their mind. So if you're doing pickups and you're going out there and you're like, "Hey, there's Duke so-and-so, there's Duke, there's Viscount Tristan, I want to fight him." Say, "Hey, can we do a set? And would you give me some pointers after?" You get a completely different experience in a lot of cases with that. Cross training. Here's a good one. So when you're looking at your training, don't fall into the trap that I'm gonna weightlift my way to my goal, or I'm gonna run my way to the goal. I'm gonna do this. When people talk, when you'll meet someone, you're like, "Wow, you've had a great summer. You're doing really good. What have you done?" And they're like, "Oh, I've started running, and it's really great." That's just what they're excited about. They are also fighting twice a week, right? Or they've also been fighting for 10 years longer to start with, and now they're getting in shape. So I'm not saying that running's non-important, but one of my training coaches, he said, "Look, once you can run 5 kilometers without stopping, you can tick running off. It's done." If you start running more than 5 kilometers at a time, you're developing a new hobby, right?
Right.
Same thing with doing weight training. I do weight training. I like it because it's quick, it's fast, and it's what I have time for. But I also see people that they're hitting the gym 3 times a week. They're fighting once a week, and they're hitting the gym 3 times a week, and they're thinking, "This is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it." And they're getting really strong, and that's great. But their fighting isn't progressing anywhere nearly as quickly as it could be if they were doing, say, weightlifting one day, running another day, and fight practice. Right? You can only go to each well for so much, right?
Yeah, we had an episode a couple of weeks ago on exactly that. Actually had Nicholas from Montier joined us for that, and it was a lot of the same kind of stuff. It's the, there's a lot of mythology around, you know, getting fit for our sport, and people think that just means like pumping iron or running a lot or this, that, and the other thing. And I think you're right, that sort of balance of activities to make sure your body's kind of well rounded in that respect. I like what you're saying about if you're running more than 5 kilometers, you're developing a different hobby.
Yeah.
Because if you're running a marathon, if you're a marathon runner, and you start doing that so that you can get better at fighting, you're getting better at being a marathon runner.
Yeah, it's funny that the fellow that was training me is a police officer, and he says, after 5 kilometers, we just let him go, right? But probably not true. I don't know. But the thing to keep in mind with all this stuff is you're gonna have to put either time or money or discipline into one of these things, right? If you're gonna progress, you need to invest something, right? And whether that's it might be buying a new pair of shoes, or one of my favorites is like, if your arm's slipping, you buy a one of those wristbands, jam it in there, your arm doesn't slip anymore, right? So you got to go to the store and try a few things, buy some new knee pads, try them out, right? It's amazing how long we'll put up with gear that doesn't work. Right. If you want to get better at something, you're going to have to put time or money into it. That's pretty much the way it works, right? And most of us don't have both. Generally, it's going to be one or the other. If you might have money, but you're probably going to be super busy. If you've got time, you probably don't have as much money as the other person. So, I mean, you can't buy knighthood. You can't buy your way to winning crown, but a helmet that fits is a lot better than a helmet that doesn't fit, right? And having the equipment that works, that's an advantage, right? If you got the time to hit 2-3 fight practices or do a bunch of training, of course it's going to be great. But there's this work-life balance that we all have to achieve, and we only have so much time to invest in things, right? Check the time. I'm going to move on to events. That's where some good ones are. And the times probably, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, we're about 10 till.
Okay, probably good time to move on to the last page. All right, so this is the event and like the day or so leading up to the event, or even the week of the event. That's where this page comes in, right? So one of the bullet points is rest. It's very simple, but rest, right? And this can be a lot of different things, right? So I've actually taken extra time off work before Crown, right? So I'll book, like if I'm traveling Friday, the worst thing you can do is drive after work Friday and try to perform well at Crown, assuming it's a drive. Right?
Yeah.
Right? On tier, it's always a drive, right? But sometimes I'll book a whole day off and use that as a relaxing day to recharge. When I can't do that, I'll try to defer things at work. Not everyone has that ability. We all have resources. Some of the things I've been able to do is defer things for the week after Crown. So I'll shift some of my schedule and I'll lighten my workload at work so that I have an easy work week. I also talk to my partner about that. I don't do a lot of yard work the weekend before a big event, a performance event. We have an agreement that we don't fight about stuff the week before Crown. The caveat.
I'll fight with you about that next week.
I had to teach one of my squires this: is you do need bingo. You have to. You can't just use that to push things off. But we have this thing in my house where it's like, hey, okay, can we please talk about this later? So we try to have a no stress week, right? And some of it, I actually, when I owned my own business, I would talk to my business partners and say, I'm going to Crown, and they understood what that meant. And they were very supportive, and they sort of helped me out. They're like, okay, so one of us has to drive into that shipyard and do this thing. And it wasn't that week, right? So trying to give yourself an easy week moving into it, and get a little bit of extra rest so that you show up rested. You don't show up tired, right? I know it sounds very simple, but it took me years to figure that out, right? Go to bed, like on the night before Crown, go to bed sober at, say, 11 o'clock, right? I used to drink and party and, hang out with my friends and have a great time, and then wonder why I was never, getting out of my Eric or something like that. And then I realized, I can party. I can do all that stuff Saturday, right? So I try not to be hungover when I'm fighting in Crown. Seems really simple,
That's just
but
crazy enough to work.
especially wait a second. And like the ironies, I actually, like Ulfgar, a good friend of mine, I remember like hanging out and I'm like, where is he going? It's like, watch him sneaking into his tent. I'm like, what? Where are you going? And he's like, I'm going to bed. Leave me alone. Right? I'm like, why? I'm like, because it's Crown tomorrow. I'm like, oh. Like I literally had to figure it out. Right? And it's a message that I've given. Like I've seen people and I'm like, hey, you're trying to get knighted, right? Yeah. Do you want to fight well tomorrow? Because we should think about that, right? Food is an issue. What I eat the weekend of is really important. As a Canadian, we don't have the amazing Mexican restaurants that I keep finding in the States, and I'm not used to eating there. So I like go down to an American event, and at night we're out there, eating big giant plates of refried beans and drinking margaritas. And I felt like hell the next day. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a Saturday night activity now. I haven't given it up. I just do it on Saturdays now. And I've actually become very particular about what I eat and the water I drink. In my area, we have incredibly soft water. There's like nothing in it. So when I travel, down to an area where it's on, if we're on a well, I don't want to drink that water at all, right? So I drink bottled water. I'm careful about, like, if someone offers me a cup of coffee, I'm like, before the tournament, I'm like, nope. I bring my own cold brew. I drink my own water. I don't eat greasy breakfasts. I'm very particular what I'm doing the night before and the morning, even if the tournament starts at 1 o'clock. We discussed that this is important if I even eat breakfast at all. Right, to date with your physiotherapy, whatever things you able to make. I've done pedicures before Crown tournament. If you've never had a pedicure, a lot of people haven't. It's amazing. And the first time I did it, I was blown away, and I thought, I need to do this before Crown.
A little bit of pampering. Looks like you might be dropping out again.
Yeah. Yeah, we did have a little bit more discussion going on in the chat about hydration, and comment was made about Gatorade. One of the listeners was talking about they wanted to get hydrated up before tournament, and they slammed a bunch of Gatorade and ended up with a splitting headache. Thing to know about Gatorade is that originally, I guess it was cooked up by some college group of nutritionists or something for the Florida Gators football team. And they made basically an electrolyte solution, which had a bunch of the electrolyte vitamins and minerals in it. And they gave it to the football team. It was back in, I think, the 60s or 70s or something like that. And the team won, and they're like, oh, well, this is the best stuff ever. And that's where it got the name Gatorade. But the thing with those electrolytes, if you're not an athlete and sweating like crazy, it can overwhelm your kidneys by drinking the solution. So while the drink became popular, people wanted it because, like, oh, you go win when you drink this stuff. The company that made Gatorade reformulated it into basically a sugar water. where they took most of the electrolytes out. There's a little bit in there, but for the most part, it's just weird colored soda. And you may think that it's a sports drink and it's actually helping you, but it's not. I'm not a big fan. I actually had a kind of amusing story. I was at a seminar a number of years ago, and we were doing Aikido, and I was sweating like crazy. My gi weighed probably 10 pounds just in raw sweat. I was just going through it like crazy. And this is quite a while ago now that I remember. It was like 15 years ago. Last time I had Gatorade, as a matter of fact, and because they had some blue Gatorade at the table, and they were refilling the water, so that wasn't even available. So I started chugging some blue Gatorade, and of course I was wearing a white gi, and I'd go back and I'd train, and I'd start wiping my forehead, and there were blue streaks on the sleeves of my gi. So the dye was running. It was just a blue dye that they add to it. It was running right through my system, and I just wondered, if I'm not sweating it out, where does that blue dye go? So that was kind of like, all right, I'm just sticking with water from here on out. I'm not even touching Gatorade anymore.
Yep.
So anyway, so back to it.
All right.
Hey. Yeah, so I changed rooms. I hope that makes a difference. My wife's good enough to take the kids outside, so hopefully that'll be okay for a bit.
Yeah. All right. So you were before you cut out there, you were talking about tournament, getting ready for it, and the like including what you eat, getting good rest, that sort of stuff.
Right. Okay.
We had this question from a listener. What's your favorite food on the day of?
Boost drinks. The liquid.
Like the Boost energy drinks, or the protein
or
drinks.
Like Ensure, like the liquid meal replacements.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I drink those. I usually have one mid-tournament as well. But I don't like the solid power bar type things. I find they sit heavy. But yeah, if it's an hour or even 2 hours before the tournament, I don't need any food. I'll maybe drink one of those things, and I've got one as a backup if I'm lucky enough to go deep enough that I need it. But then, so anyways, like jumping back, it's like making sure that your physio's up to speed if that's something that you do. I've done massages, like actual, like full on massage, like just to be loose and ready. My wife took me up.
We actually have this comment here too. Somebody saying they were mentally checking their list of tourney prep, and that clearly needs more pedicure in my life.
Yes, the pedicure is hilarious, but it's amazing. Tamara took me for my first pedicure, and I was just blown away. I'm like, my feet feel amazing. And so there's been several tournaments where I've had heraldically correct toenails for my.
We had that question too. What colors? Yeah.
It's funny because you do that, and it's hard not to not think about the tournament for the week ahead of time, and you keep looking down and seeing, your heraldic colors on your toenails.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, on one level too, that like it's just the simple pleasures, right? It's the things that you can that's a simple thing that you can do to just kind of, it's an indulgence that you can do that is fun, that can take your mind off of having to perform.
Yeah. And it's something that like my wife and I have done. We go out together, and it's like, because we approach fighting as a team, so we'll both go, and it's something I've enjoyed doing, and my feet feel great, right? So like there's like little traditions. Like I'm always if I've used the sword at all, I always retape it, and and I'm the whole time, I'm not just retaping my sword, I'm meditating. Like this is something that I'm doing to think about what's going to happen. And, I set it up. I'm like, this is the sword that's going to do it. Right.
I've had people offer to like tape up a sword for me. Oh, if you got the tape and stuff, I'll do that for you. But there is something like cathartic about the sword making process. Right. I mean, it is very, very much ritualistic, especially going into the crown. And I don't know so much that I've got the, it's like, this is, by the power of Grayskull. But it is very, very much it's part of that process. and making your swords is I don't know, maybe therapeutic, but I mean, it's ritualistic for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've got to make my own.
Yeah, and like even like I get so much into the little things that I have a very specific way I put the tape on. Right, I think about which way the tape is laying so that when it comes across a shield, it doesn't fold the edge. Right, so I'm shingling my tape, making sure it's done right. Some of the things I'll work on too is like little things to prevent something going wrong, so that I'm not distracted. Right, like if you have an armor failure on the day of. Even if it gets fixed, even if you have a way to overcome that, you're just messed up, right? Like I had a chin strap break. This is years ago. I had a chin strap break, and it was amazing that these guys were at the side of the Eric, and they took my helmet, and within they had this little thing set up, and they fixed it right then and there, and I was able to actually keep fighting. I'm like, they had this little thing set up, and it was like super cool, but I got slaughtered. Because everyone was watching, and it just threw me off, and that's before I sort of figured out how to re-engage. I'll actually jump onto that. Like there's a thing I call trigger, right? So you should have a trigger that resets you, right? So what I do is I smack my sword into my shield a certain way, and when I do that, I'm fighting, right? And I do it a lot every time. Like so, if they call a hold and reset us. And it reminds me of the Marshall staffs clicking, right? Because when those things click together, it's on. So I do that. So if the Marshals stop us and set up the rope or do something, say, okay, go ahead. I go bang, and then I'm coming in again, and that's my reset button. And I don't care. I've taught that to other people, and it's not important what you do for a reset, but having that reset and to tell yourself it's back on, it's time to go, right? Doing warm-ups. Sometimes you have to be really creative on how to get a warm-up in a crown tournament, but developing your warm-up strategy is important. Finding someone and asking them to warm you up is different than doing a couple pickup fights before fighting, right? So I'm specific as to what I want in a warm-up fight. And that could change from person to person, but there was a year where that was my big thing, learning that if I go into the tournament cold, I just don't perform as well. So now I'm greedy about my warm up. I make sure I get it, and I make sure it's what I want.
So let me ask you about that. Were you talking about the difference between a warm up versus pickups?
Yeah.
Getting before the list. So what's the difference? Is it that when you're doing warm-ups, I mean, are you creating a mindset that says I'm preparing for tournament as opposed to I'm just screwing around with a couple of guys?
Yes.
Just getting some fights.
Yeah. So I usually want to do two, and again, everyone will have their own sort of formula, but I'll usually want to do a warm up with one of my squires, maybe someone that knows me, someone that knows how I like to go from like a quick little light stretchy kind of thing to picking up the speed faster. And now I'm physically warmed up, and then I'm going to want to fight someone of a higher caliber that will get the adrenaline going.
Right.
But that person is warming me up. Okay. So it's not often going to be another competitor. It's not going to be someone that's going to hurt me.
Right.
It's someone that's just going to bring it up a notch to the point where I'm going, oh, it's on now, right? Like, and it'll usually be triggers. It'll be an experience night, and I'll be like, hey, would you mind warming me up? Like, give me 3 good ones, and most people are happy to do that, right? So, let's get the adrenaline going, because I sometimes I'm underwhelmed. I come back down, and you've just been sitting in processional, and I need that charge. I need to be going. And if I don't want to fight my first fight without having that rolling already, right? So yeah, we talked about meal replacements, energy drinks. I like the little tiny bottles of energy drink. They work wonders for me. I don't want anything carbonated.
The 5-hour energy.
5-hour energy. If you've never had them, or if someone hasn't used them, I highly recommend trying one at a fight practice, because they're not for everybody. I'm particular about what kind of energy drink I use. Remember, I probably haven't had any coffee today, so I want just a little bit of a stimulant. And then like I said, I'll have a meal replacement on hand. I'm going to jump into what a really, really important one for me, and that's having someone corner you. And I've seen some amazing things changing fighters' level of competency. So I've had a few squires that have helped me develop something that works for me. My inspiration and I have had a lot of talks about, and I think everyone should talk about the person you're fighting for, what that means, what they're doing, what you're doing, whether that's your partner or someone that you just fight for. Understand what little things you are asking them to do, and it's little things like I like it when my inspiration doesn't stand right behind my opponent, because it feels like I'm saluting my opponent twice then. It's a silly little thing, but I like to have a little bit of this, right? So my inspiration knows just to be a few degrees off, because that's something that bugs me, right? My inspiration is also part of my cornering team, but they're not full on. They do different things, right? So I'll give you a couple examples. The person that's cornering me is going to go to the board and see who I'm fighting next. So they'll come back and they'll be like, "It's Sir So-and-so. Do you know that person?" And I'll be like, "Yep, got it." And then, like, "It's Sir So-and-so. Do you know them?" "No." And then they disappear again. They come back and they're like, "Right-handed heater. He's, this tall, this kind of armor." Like, they give me a description, right? And I sit there, right? And I'm focusing on me and what I'm doing. I have a sort of system of assessing opponents. If you're fighting in your area, you pretty much know everybody. But as you're going, or if you're traveling, you don't know everybody. But so there's some neat things that are in the SCA. We get to pick our personas, right? We get to pick our names, and we get to pick our own devices. These are things that would normally just be given to you. You have your own, your parents pick your name, and your device is already done. So by having that information, I get a little window into what kind of person you are, right? And I stereotype you, right? So if your name is one word, right, and your device is a color, right, and it's earth tones, right, then I'm like, okay, this is a fairly straightforward, simple fighter. I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they're just going to come and bring it. Whereas if I can't pronounce your name and there's like 7 syllables, and your gear is very fancy, and your device has got a whole thing going on, I'm like, this person is likely to try to outthink me rather than just outfight me, right? So I get this little tiny window of what I might be expecting back there. And you're like going back to your support staff. So the people that are helping me bring me that information. When I'm really going for a tournament, I will have an area set up where this is where I'm going to sit. If I'm really going for it, I've actually gone as far as had a secondary area, right? So I know that, like, I have an Eric side sunshade and I've got my chair in there, but I also know it's going to be a busy place and there's going to be a lot of activity. Sometimes I'll set up another chair that's back 20 feet that's not by anyone's stuff, and that's my other chair. And my support team knows that if I go sit in that chair, I'm rallying. Something's gone wrong, and I need a minute, and they know to leave me alone. Which brings me to the last thing on this list. Rallying is a thing that I've had to. That's probably one of my last things that I've really put a lot of effort to and learned. In our game, there's a lot of times you don't make it to the finals clean, right? You've had to been beaten once, and in a lot of times you're frustrated with that. Maybe you're frustrated with yourself. Maybe you're frustrated with your opponent. And having to learn how to rally is another. It's a whole other skill set, and it's made me jump to a whole other level, right? Because I used to have a bad fight, and then I would be down. We're talking about 5%. No, I'm down 15, 20%, right? And trying to get past a bad fight is something that I've really worked on, and the key to that for me was, in all honesty, forgiving my opponents and realizing that these are all my friends, and that I actually don't think anyone is showing up there to not take a shot.
Trading with someone, and they'll be like, "Well, what do you got for me?" And like, nothing. I was just trying to kill you. I'm sorry.
So when you have a bad fight, bring yourself back online properly is a practice skill, right? So I will often have either a way of communicating to my cornering team that this is what I need. I need people to not talk to me, and everyone has to work through that in their own way, right? So that's the high points of the list for now. I mean, you have any questions that you want to talk about, or?
We do have a listener question. This one, please remind me the story of why Eric is used, I guess, as the term for the list. Anybody want to field that one?
That's an old school West Kingdom tradition, and Ontier being a Western product of the West Kingdom more directly. That's the terminology that's kind of come over. But the old story, as I recall, is that the Eric was like the ropes itself, and it was just I know His Highness Thorfinn is he's in the comments there, so he might be able to kind of shed some light on that too. But yeah, it was basically somebody just looked at the list, the ropes for the list, and referred to it as the Eric, and so they've kind of just taken that to be the list field itself is referred to as an Eric.
The story I've heard is that the ropes in question were red. They had red flags on them. And this is, early SCA days that someone started calling that list field was called Eric the Red.
Yeah.
And somehow it stuck. And it's weird because I've been trained like that. Like I came up calling it the Eric, and it's always been the Eric. And it was years later where someone's like, that's not the real name for it.
Yeah. Thorfinn says there were two sets of list ropes. And one was called Eric the Red, and that's some early SCA stuff right there. Yeah, so Savaric, I think the big takeaway from all this, one of the reasons I've been wanting to have you talk about this for a long time, is like there's just little things that a lot of people don't think about. That are going to make a huge difference. And early on we were talking about, what is 5%, right? I'm reminded of late 80s LA Lakers, coached by Pat Riley. They had lost the NBA finals. This is Magic Johnson and James Worthy and all those guys, right? They'd lost the NBA finals. And Pat Riley had told everybody that, like, you are going to get 1% better at every one of your, primary statistics, right? Whether it's, shooting or free throws or steals or whatever, and he just told the whole team, it's like, we're going to focus on everybody. We're going to look at the stats you had this year, and everybody's just going to get 1% better, which doesn't really seem like a lot, but when you have 12 players on a team that are 1% better, now the whole team's 12% better. And part of that calculus too was they say, you're just going to get 1% better about this. And he never said that you're going to win the NBA championship by doing this. It's just like we're just going to get better at these. We're just going to get this much better at these things, and it's one of those things that because it is measurable. You can throughout the year, you can say, I need a couple extra buckets here, or I need to, maybe I need to go back to practice and figure out where I am on my free throws. Or, maybe I need to look at some film and figure out how I can get some more steals or get some better rebounds or that sort of thing. It's like, how do I get just that much better at these things? And as it was by increasing, as I recall, all of them had increased their primary stats by far more than the 1%, and they ended up winning the championship the next year.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work out like that, but that it is always the little things that people I always say about, particularly about Crown, you can't cram for this test, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guy that comes to you a week before Crown and saying, "Hey, I'm gearing up for Crown. What can you do for me?" I'm like, I can help you with the Crown that's happening a year from now.
Yeah.
Or even
I can take a video of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that we saw a lot coming out of the COVID, as we were starting to have Crown coming back, and people are like, "Oh, we got Crown coming up, and it's the first one we've had in a couple of years." And any pointers or whatever on how to approach this Crown, and I'm like, just go and execute. Just execute whatever you have right now. Because when we've all been sitting around for 18 months to 2 years before we can compete at that level again, very few of us are in a position where I was fortunate enough to win the first post-COVID Crown that we had, but that was not my first.
Yeah.
And that kind of preparation and things that I needed to do, I'd had for years prior to that. So for me, coming back into Crown tourney and just executing, and there was still some emotional stuff that I was dealing with because we've been out for so long, and there was a lot going on. But as far as the physical stuff and some of this 5% stuff, it's like I've been working on that for so long that it was already there.
Your starting point is different, right?
Yeah, totally.
So. But it's still there. Like I remember, I think the first time we really sort of talked about this class, you're like 5% better. You look at me like, which 5%, right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, in theory, the last 5%, right? So like this is all assuming that you're already proficient at whatever level you are, right? But one thing that's interesting, I was just thinking about, like talking about Crown. One thing that I realized is there's a fundamental difference in training for a Crown tournament versus knighthood. And I was talking to one of my buddies, and he's talking about what he was doing, the changes that he was making to get to Crown, to get to being a competitor at Crown. And he was describing it to me, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is training for knighthood." Right. And he was talking about trying to get to this one practice. Like one of the things I preach is get to a different fight practice. And he's like, okay, well, I could come maybe once every second month. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Come 4 times right before a Crown, right? Yeah. Stack your effort. Right. And when you're training to get knighted, you're really trying to make sure that your worst fight is still at the bar. Right. When you're training to win the tournament, you're fighting. You have to gamble with your fighting, and sometimes you'll have to gamble a bit with your training and say, "Well, I'm gonna work on this shot because no one's seen me do it, and I'm gonna try to. This is my strategy for the thing, and maybe it pays off, maybe it doesn't. But you've gotten the accolade. You're not being judged anymore, so it's okay to take a risk." It's also okay to not be this good for the rest of the year, right? So when I'm training, I'm stacking I'm using up all my favors at work, all my favors at home. I'm putting in all my effort for this one weekend, and I will rarely really push my efforts for more than 1 Crown in a year, and I put all my chips in there and go for it, right?
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. Well, I know, you mentioned when you came down here, right before you won your second crown. And I think one of the things you got from that weekend was not so much that, I mean, Ontier's got some top shelf fighters there. I mean, I've been saying for a long time that Ontier has the deepest crown in the known world. There's more people in that list that have a viable chance to win that list than there is pretty much anywhere else. And I think what you got from being down here, to your point of get to a different practice, you got down here, and we give you just something that's just different.
Yeah.
It's not that it's better, but it's different, and it makes you think about fighting in a different way. And then when a month later, when you go up to your crown there, you're aware that you have to think differently. You can't just categorize everybody into on-tier fighters, because even within your own kingdom, the summits, on-tier, central regions, Midlands, I mean, they're different fighting cultures, and so being able to see something different, I think, perhaps kind of just gives you that reminder that you can't count on seeing a particular fight from any particular fighters in your kingdom.
Yeah, I've noticed that if you travel to someone else's fight practice and like even making a road trip out of it, you get an incredibly different experience than fighting those same people doing pickups, right? Yeah. Especially if you let them know you're coming ahead of time and say, hey, I want to come train with you. What's a good week for you? And that, it's a completely different, you get to see how other people approach their training, because all the fight practices I've been to, they're all slightly different, right? Yeah. And having some nights in an area and go, hey, I'm coming, I'd love to do some sets with you. You make sure that they don't miss that fight practice, and you're rewarded with, in all honesty, all this attention, right? Like people are like, yeah, great, we heard you're coming. There's 4 of us lined up for you to spar with. Awesome, right? And it's I don't know if I've ever regretted doing that, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's fun.
Yeah. I'd gone up to a Stromgard practice a number of years ago, and I made sure to let them know that I was coming up. It's the regular weekly practice, and as it turned out, it was one of the bigger practices that they had for some time. And the number of fighters and the quality of fighters that I got to fight, because I made the effort to say, hey, look, I'm going to be in town. Man, I was top shelf. I mean, there's some really, really good fights that came out because, like I said, I told him I was coming.
Yeah. Another thought is making sure you're open-minded. Good information can come from all kinds of places, and I've seen, and I know I know it's been discussed on Coach's Corner a little bit too, but like, you don't need to outrank me to teach me, right? Right. I was having an arm issue years ago, and a squire I was hanging out with goes, have you changed anything? Are you doing anything different? I'm like, well, actually, I'm experimenting with this lanyard instead of a trigger. So I'd been fighting with the trigger so long that I was death gripping my sword because I didn't have that feedback that right. My hand was in the right spot and that it was safe. And I was injuring myself because of death gripping the sword. And the squire's the one that clued me in on that, right? Like, I was like, oh, and he's like, you might, and I mentioned, I'm like, yeah, I changed my sword. He goes, you might want to change that. I'm like, I think you're right. So, yeah, you don't know.
Like you said, that goes back to the ego, right? I mean, you got to let that go and just understand that that information can come from anywhere, and as long as you're open to that input, because as I'm often saying about when we're looking at fighting analysis, it's not that the 1 year fighter is going to tell the Duke what they're doing wrong in an analysis, but sometimes you look at it and go, okay, well, why are you doing it this way? Like, it's clearly effective, but why? And a lot of times for those more experienced fighters, that's going to make us like review, okay, why do I do it that way? You know? And, not just because that's the way I've always done it. Because if I can't have a good explanation for why I do a certain thing, then the things that I'm doing well even if they're winning me fights, if they're not transferable, then what's the point?
Right. And things change, right? Like you should question everything. So if you're looking at, why you're throwing shots a certain way and why you're approaching training a certain way, and you realize, well, because you learned that 10 years ago or longer, and it's like, yeah, but the sport's evolved, right? The sport's changed.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's not working anymore, or there's a technology that's replaced what you have. There's a much better way of doing it. You're just stuck in the past, right? So I try to question everything once in a while, and whether that's my fighting or my approach or my gear, everything should be looked at from time to time. And I try to have a list of one thing that I want to change, one thing I want to do better in sort of each of those sort of categories, if you will. Right? Like I need to work on some of my footwork. I need to change my chin strap. I need to buy a really cool helmet or something like that. Right? So whatever I think is the next thing, once that's done, I plan the next thing after that. So continue improvement.
Wow. Hey, Tristan, you got any final questions as we wrap up here a little bit?
No, I don't. I think this has been a great list. Thank you very much, Duke Savaric, for coming on the show and sharing your stuff.
My pleasure. Sorry, I dropped out a couple times.
That's quite all right. It happens to all of us. I love how you put these things in such a way that it's like, don't think anything is too small to overlook. Because any of us have been fighting for years will go through, oh my gosh, I did this one tiny little thing and it just felt like it helped a significant amount.
Yeah. If it's a small thing, it should be easy to fix.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And there will just be a lot of small things, but they add up to big things when you put them all together. Yeah. But no, this has been great. Thank you.
Awesome. My pleasure.
All right. Tristan, I was just looking up. Do you know what's our episode we got coming up next week?
Yeah, we shuffled things around a little bit because tonight's episode kind of got shifted. But next week we've got an elephant in the room episode, and we're going to talk about reflecting on when it's time to hang it up. And this may be just an internal discussion with yourself about, am I injured too much? Is this just becoming not fun? Is life intruding upon the SCA? Am I stressed out because I'm doing it? All these kinds of things can make you question whether it's time to hang up from fighting, either permanently or maybe just taking a break from it. So we're going to talk about that in depth.
All right, we His Highness has asked one more time. So what was your nail color for your pedicure?
Oh, okay. Well, for my first cornet, it was blue and white for cheery colors. I've done black and yellow for my own heraldic, and when I was gunning for crown, it was yellow and white for on tier.
There you go.
Next time I do it, I'll post.
All right. Well, Savaric, thanks again for filling in last minute. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
My pleasure.
If you've got a whole list of them, I'm sure folks would appreciate you posting that up to the Coach's Corner discussion group so they can see some of the other bullet points you have in there. So
I will do that.
Yeah. Thanks again, Tristan. As always, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. And we'll see everybody. We'll see everybody next week for another lively discussion on the elephant in the room. Those are always fun. Always fun to talk about some of that stuff. And we try to talk about some of the things that we're okay having those difficult conversations. And we always appreciate the fact that people are kind and generous in those difficult discussions. So we expect some of that next week as well. So, all right, everybody have a great night.
Good night.
Have a great weekend.